Welcome to Financial Behavior Thought Leaders. I'm Mary, and this podcast takes you behind the scenes with the top speakers in financial services. So whether you're an advisor booking a client event, an event planner looking for the perfect keynote, or a financial professional wanting to learn more from industry thought leaders, you're in the right place. Today, we're featuring Evan Beach, one of Financial Behavior Keynote Group's exclusive speakers. Evan is a nationally recognized wealth manager, speaker, and author. But what makes him truly stand out is he's a practitioner first. His keynote, Retain and Gain, an evidence-based client communication schedule to maximize referrals and retention, is all about challenging the status quo and using data, not tradition, to reshape how we engage with clients. Evan, we're excited to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, super excited to be here.
So I have to ask, before we jump into the meat of your keynote, I want to back it up a bit. How did you get into speaking from working with clients to getting on stage?
Yeah, it was really the working with clients part, or I should say trying to work with clients. I started in the profession in 2009, which was less than ideal. But I was literally sitting in a boiler room in Philadelphia making cold calls. And I got lucky a few times with that. And I had a client who was a plastic surgeon, basically in New York City, and he'd just come out of residency. And so that's why he hired us. Like, his life had just changed. He went from making, almost nothing to a lot. And he said, "Hey, we have speakers come every Thursday if you want to come up and buy lunch and speak to us." And candidly, the thing I was most nervous about was buying lunch. I was like, when you say lunch, like, are is this Panera or is this something a little bit more than that? So I drove from Philadelphia to Montefiore Hospital in New York City. And I don't know, it was probably 10 or 15 people at this lunch and learn like that we've all been to. And people go there when they can't afford their lunch. But I remember thinking afterwards, it's like, wow, that was so much better than calling 15 people, and you get to educate, and it was fun. And I think I could be good at it. And so I did a few of those. And then in 2011, the firm I was with, ING, moved me down to Virginia, and my parents had just hit, let me do this math. Yeah, they had just hit Social Security eligibility. And so them and their friends are always asking me questions about Social Security and Medicare and all these fairly dry, complex topics. And so I started hosting Social Security socials where, and this is like, I mean, we were really just piecing things together. Like, I would rinse off the labels from Trader Joe's wine bottles because that's what I was buying, and put on like an ING logo that said Social Security Social, like Evan Beach CFP. And I would get somebody from my office to come and bartend, like another advisor there. So it was really just piecing things together, but it worked. And then, sorry, this is a long story, but 2015, I ended up switching to the RIA side of the business. And the firm I went to was doing about 50 events a year, like prospecting events per year. And we split them like that. That's why I got hired. And so I went from speaking, once a quarter to speaking every other week, then every week, then twice a week. And so there were a lot of reps there. And in that, I applied. This was also in 2015. Just through like a next gen FPA thing to speak the FPA national conference. And I got picked to speak there. And that sort of started this parallel speaking track of, okay, I'm speaking to consumers, but now I'm also speaking to financial planners and aspiring financial planners. So
I think that's part of the interesting conversation that I've had in many of these conversations is it's the reps, right? It's doing it again and again and perfecting that craft over and over. But I really like your take on it is you've really seen it from the ground up. You've really taken it from, I work with clients. You still continue to see clients and own your own advisory firm, but while also carefully crafting that message that resonates not just with clients, but advisors as well. What you're specifically really known for is bridging that gap between research and practice to where you mentioned Texas Tech earlier. You've really taken a lot of not just theory, but practical application of what that looks like on a daily basis. Tell us more about what makes that unique and resonates with advisors.
So I had a conversation when I was at Texas Tech, and I was sort of new to the academic world and fascinated by it because I didn't go to a financial planning program. I went and did my CFP work when I was already in the industry. Mm-hmm. And so it was very intriguing to me to see these kids who are 18 and 19 learning all this stuff I learned when I was 25. But I was down in Lubbock, and I was talking to John Salter, who you know, and he was a practicing PhD. So like he had a PhD in personal financial planning, but also was a partner at an advisory firm. And I said, how many people do you think there are like you that there are PhDs and practicing? And now that number is much bigger, right? Because you know probably most of the people who are doing it, but it's probably 10 times that number. But it was like 5. It was almost none, and they all came from Texas Tech. And I said, wow. Like, imagine in the medical field if like all the research that was done never actually made it to the patients. Like, that's what I was thinking was happening in financial planning. And I think to a large extent still is. Like, you can go and read these academic publications, but like, is anybody out there actually taking them and putting them into practice? Yes, not very many. So that was the idea behind it. And I pitched the editor at the time of the Journal of Financial Planning for this idea called Research in Action, which was just that. It was taking research and saying, here's this research. It's very applicable. Here's how you apply it in practice. And so that was the genesis of it. And
well, and I think that's the important part of it. It's not just here's the research, but it works actually as a two-way street, because as we apply research, we find sometimes the brokenness of the theoretical model, right? And so it's important for both the practitioner to utilize it. And I love your example of the medical practice, but in vice versa, practice also informs us on the research side of what's working and what's not.
Yeah, and I think I've seen that play out in the presentation we're going to discuss today. Like I had to go back to the folks who did that research and say, hey, look, I know your research says this, but the real world says something else. And that's in one instance. And in another, it's like, I know the research says this, but it's totally unattainable in the real world.
Totally. Well, let's dig in. So your speech is called Retain and Gain, an evidence-based client communication schedule to maximize referrals and retention. Dig in.
That's long. Yeah. I tried to get AI to cut it down, and I just didn't like anything it came up with. So that's a future goal. That presentation, it's based on research that came from Texas Tech. There are actually a few different folks from different universities, one of which was Texas Tech. But the idea of it when I read it is the way we've always done it is not a good reason to do something. Mm-hmm. Right. And so this, I guess I'll start from a very high level. This research basically goes through and says, how often should you communicate about investments? How often should you meet with clients? How often should you send handwritten notes? How often should you communicate about hobbies, communicate about planning? So those are the 5 things. And each of them does a different thing for retention and for referrals. It can increase retention or decrease retention. It can increase referrals or decrease referrals. And when I read it, I was like, this is the answer to the test. But like when we join a firm, especially a big firm, and you ask, okay, well, how often do we meet with clients? Once a year. If you ever followed up and said, why? The answer is always, it's just the way we've always done it.
Yeah. Bob did it that way.
Yeah.
That's how we're doing it.
Right. Exactly right. So the same is true about investment updates. So we do them quarterly. Well, why? Like it's all based on just somebody set this precedent 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it hasn't been revisited. So why don't we just ask the clients what they want to do? Why don't we ask the clients if they plan on sticking with us based on what we're doing? Why don't we ask the clients if they've given a referral in the last 12 months based on what we're doing? And then we can gauge, well, what's the right amount? So that's what this research says. And once again, it's based on the premise, like the way we've always done it is not a good reason to keep doing it. Otherwise, people wouldn't have easy passes, right? Like it's,
right.
You could point to this in every facet of your life. Like it's why we use smartphones instead of a flip phone. And so it's just the next iteration of client communications for our profession. And that's what the presentation is. It just gives you the answers. And then I say, and here's how I've applied this in practice, which I think is the unique angle there.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to really what you're saying. So what's the value? What do your clients see as value add? Not what do you think the value is that you're providing, but what are they actually receiving as value? And I think that may be the interesting part for most advisors is what they're doing may not add that much value at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I knew you had Carl on a few episodes ago, but like he talks about in the Kitsis and Carl podcast, cutting things out and seeing if people actually cared. And there's time that's easier to do than ever because you can look at open rates and you can see referral rates. You can see all of those things through digital marketing. But yeah, it's like what you're probably doing a lot of stuff you don't need to, and you're probably not doing a lot of stuff you should do.
Totally. All right. So every good keynote really digs in with a story. So tell us, you don't have to give the whole story away, but give us a good taste of how this is applied in your keynote.
Yeah. So I think the opening to this presentation, but let me back up. I spent 8 years I spent 6 years at ING, then I spent 8 years at an RIA, and we grew from, and I was hired for growth. Like that, I was the head of business development at this firm. And we grew from like 200 some million, just under 300 million to 1.1 billion I think we did it in 6 years. So 2015 to 2021, the firm was acquired in 24 at about 1.4 billion. So it was a success story. It was super intense, but basically the opening story is me just walk, and I remember this vividly, like being walked down the hallway of this firm and meeting each person and hearing about what they did and being, I guess, maybe bold or stupid enough to ask the why questions, like, oh, this person schedules meetings for us. It's like, well, how often do we meet with clients? Once a year. Well, why? I don't know. It's the way we've always done it. It's like, well, why does that person call everybody? Why don't you just schedule like the dentist does? I don't know. It's the way we've always done it. And this is Mark. He runs investments. And well, how often do we talk about investments with clients? Once a year. Why? It's the way we've always done it. And like, I'm sure that guy, Rich, so if he ever listens to this, he may remember this too. Probably want to be like,
kid in the back seat. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. I'm like my own kids. Gosh, was probably wanted to throw me out of the car using that analogy. It's like, why did we hire this guy? Yeah. So that's how we open the presentation. And then we just go through like, okay, here's the answer to the test. Here's what we were doing. Here's how we applied it in practice. And here are the results, both good and bad, because not all of these things were like, oh yeah, that worked perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I'm hearing, especially in this presentation, it's very hands-on, right? Like you're going to be able to walk away from this with applicable, actionable advice that you can implement right away.
Yeah.
Give us a couple of examples of how you've seen advisors apply this and make a big change in their own practice.
I'll just go in order. Like investment communication, we always do it quarterly, right? Like an investment communication is the greatest indicator of retention, which I think a lot of people don't realize. But the right cadence is actually monthly, and that's so. When I started at this RIA, the RIA was Campbell Wealth Management. When I started there, it was you do like one monster meeting every year. You'd update the financial, like all the old school stuff that we were taught. We'd walk through the portfolio. And so that was the biggest gap I identified. It's like, we're losing clients here. And I don't know if this is why we're losing clients, but I know that based on this research, like the best thing we can do is communicate monthly on investments, which a lot of people shy away from because, and I fall in this boat too. It's like we use passive investments. Like we don't want our clients watching the market every day. And so I think that the wrong way to apply this is you just sign up for like a newsletter service and have them white label your investment communication. So what we did is we were already rebalancing portfolios, call it 4 to 6 times a year. So I'll put it in the middle of 5 times a year. And every time we did that, we'd send an internal letter out to all the advisors. Here's why we did what we did. So then we just polished that up. And every time we did a rebalance, that letter just went to the clients. And this is way easier with ChatGPT now, or Gemini, or Grok, or pick your AI tool. So that got us to 5. Then we were meeting once a year. The right cadence for meeting with clients, and this is one where I really had to challenge the researchers, is 4 times a year.
Oh, wow.
I think that's too many, but I understand the consumer perspective, because I've had a lot of new clients come on who say, I want to meet 4 times a year, but they never stay there. The joke I always make, and it's not really a joke, but it's because I've seen it happen, is when you meet with clients once a year, you miss weddings, right? Like, you don't know that they got married or had a grandkid. Like, we work with the retirees. You miss like those milestone events. When you meet with them 4 times a year, you're like talking about how hot it is. Like, great. Snowed a lot this year, or it's hot, or it's raining a lot, or it's like some stupid conversation that you're trying to fill air with. So anyway, we went from 1 meeting a year to 2 meetings a year, which I do think is the right cadence, once again, for retired clients. That'll depend on your clients. But then that's 2 market updates per year that we're doing in advance of those meetings via video. We're doing it via Loom. So now we've gone from 1 investment communication per year to 2, plus the 5 rebalance updates, we're at 7. And then all we did is once a quarter, we emailed all the clients and we said, what are you thinking about the markets right now? What questions do you want answered? And we took the questions, typically like 4 or 5 questions that we saw most frequently, and we just recorded a video and sent it to all the clients. And it was like, yeah, everybody's going to ask the same things, same 5 questions in different ways. Why don't we proactively answer these things? And I think so much about this is just proactivity versus reactivity. Like, advisors are always like, oh, I get back to everybody within 24 hours. It's like, well, what if you communicated what they cared about so they didn't reach out in the first place?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what if it's like spraying your lawn before the weeds come out.
Yeah. 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 Well, and I think part of this too that I'm hearing is the sheer fact of what's right for that client. So maybe what I was hearing 4 times, maybe right for a new client who is unsure, doesn't really know what to expect or how to expect. And then over time, as that process becomes more streamlined, it changes, right? Just like the relationship changes and deepens. There's less check-in or making sure you're doing your job. I think what I love about this is just the sheer fact that you can walk away with so much in your queue that you can be like, why am I doing this? Like, you're probably going to leave with more questions of where did this come from? I think we'll all turn into Evans at the end of the day, right? Why?
Yeah.
Start questioning the things that really don't make sense.
Yeah. And it's like when it comes to communication, I would say that pretty much everything you've done is probably a result of the way it's always been done.
And I think what you're doing is adding not just that academic side, but that behavioral side, right? Again, if we were just all computers or robots and expected this versus the human side, what does that client specifically care about? Maybe they don't care to receive an investment update 5 times a year because it stresses them out, right? And so how do you interact that human aspect with it? Well, I love this. I do have one final question, though, for you. And this is going to be a little more personal, but what is something that most people don't know, but it does influence the way you show up as a speaker?
I'll have 2 stories, and feel free to edit one or both of them out if it gets too long. But the first one, and I think the problem with conferences in general is that we don't implement what we learn. Right? Like, you go from one session, you open up your phone and you're like, oh, I have 1 million emails, right? We're always prioritizing what's urgent over what's important. And
good point.
So I think, the closing story of this is like 2013, my dad was actually, he's a marathoner, and he was set to break the record for most consecutive Boston marathons. And so we all flew up to Boston, and he was running, I think it was number 46. So he's run a lot of Boston marathons, and we're flying from all over the country. And my family has a routine there. We take the T out, which is like the metro out, and we saw my dad run by at mile 9. We get back on the T. We go between like mile 18 to 20. And since number 40, so since his 40th marathon, he's got something called dystonia, which is like a Parkinson's cousin. So it makes it very hard for him to run. And then at this point, he actually doesn't run anymore. But one of us, my brother, sister, I would get in at mile 20 and run the final 6 miles with him just to try and get him there.
Yeah, yeah.
So this year we had grandstand passes, which we've never had before. Those are the bleacher seats on the finish line. And we got it because my dad was breaking the record this year, or that year, I should say. And so we all went to the same thing, mile 9, see my dad. We're getting text updates. This is before like an app tracked you the whole time. And we know that something is wrong between mile 9 and 18 because his splits are getting so much slower, but we don't know what. And so eventually he gets there, and he had hurt his Achilles at mile 10, and he just basically had to walk. So it didn't really change what we were doing. We just got in there and started walking briskly, but walking with him. And this is when you go, if anybody who's listening has ever been to the Boston Marathon, you'd be able to picture this. These are the Newton Hills. So you're going uphill for a long time, but you're going through the Boston College campus, and it's a huge party. It's a holiday in Boston. It's usually like drunk kids, like screaming at you, and it's really exciting. But this year, people were talking about explosions. You could hear people talking about explosions at the finish line. And I've obviously never been in that situation before, and don't know what I would do if I were in it again, but we just kept going. Mm-hmm. And then the race, which is 4 lanes, at this point narrowed down to 2. I've been there many times. I've never seen that happen. And there were buses of National Guard going by, and she just knew something was wrong. Mm. And finally we got to mile 24, and the race was just canceled. Like there was blockades up. And so you probably figured this out. 2013 was the year of the bombing at the Boston Marathon. And if you look at my dad's time for the first 9 miles or 10 miles, he would have finished 4 minutes after the bomb went off had he not gotten injured. Obviously, nobody wanted him to get injured, but that injury kept my entire family out of those grandstand seats and safe.
Yeah. Wow.
So I tell that story not to give away the punchline at the end of this event or to make people depressed or whatever, but I wear this blue band around, which you can't see because this is audio, but basically is a reminder, like the things that I know I should do today or want to do today, to do them today, because we don't know when our road ends. Yeah. So I told that story, I don't know, 500 times, but still get choked up. So that's one, is like, I want people not just to like, oh, this is cool, but like, one of the things I got on the feedback form was like, just like Nike, just do it, right? I want people to walk out of there and say like, I'm going to do this, and it'll be great for your clients. It'll also be great for you. So I think that's long enough for, for the one story.
I also know you have a very competitive family. So tell us a little bit about how that influences how you show up on stage.
Yeah, so I just told you, my dad was a very good runner. I think he ran 15 sub 40 marathons, which is not sub 40, sub 240 marathons, which is very, very good. And I'm the youngest. My brother's an attorney, very, very smart. Both my parents are attorneys, not to just brag about my family, but it's really just to put down myself. And then my sister was an incredible athlete. So she won the University of Maryland. She won 2 NCAA championships. She was the Washington Post athlete of the decade. So I grew up sort of in this ultra competitive environment, and I was like sort of good at sports and not so good at school. good enough to play some college sports, but I think it changes the way I approach speaking, and that I approach it from like a competitive mindset, from an athletic or an athlete's mindset of like, I'm not there to like, hey, just pass out information. You can get information on Google. You can get information now, better information on Gemini. I'm there to win. Like I want people to walk out of there and be like, whoa, that was different. That was not what I expected. And I like can't wait to actually do some of these things. Like, I think we all have speakers that we've seen like that in our lives. Like, I remember for me, Jesse Itzler was that way. And I remember walking out and being like, I'm like going to do something awesome right now. And that's what I want people to take away.
Yeah. Well, and I think it speaks to what you started with at the beginning, as the reps, right? An athlete doesn't become an athlete by waking up the next morning and sitting on the couch. It's that every day, that practice, that rep, that trying again and falling. I mean, to go back to your other example, it's sometimes falling and messing up and figuring out the right way to do things, or questioning the right way to do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Evan, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with me today. It's been really awesome. If you're looking for a speaker who blends real advisor experience with research-backed strategies to improve your client relationships and business outcomes, Evan Beach delivers clarity and impact. You can learn more and book Evan at financialbehaviorthoughtleaders.com. Thanks for joining us on Financial Behavior Thought Leaders, and we'll be back with more conversations that bring you closer to the leading voices in financial services.